In video number 4, we talked about the most important relationship that you can have in falconry, and that is to have a very, very well qualified sponsor, because falconry is an apprentice program where you have to apprentice for 2 years. And so your sponsor, your mentor, is extremely important. The second most important relationship that you can have in falconry is with your local game warden, your local conservation officer. And this is absolutely critical. This is going to basically make your falconry so much easier and so much more convenient if you have a really good working relationship with your local CO. Now, when I first moved to Utah, my falconry experience with the California fishing game was wonderful. Local game warden was really a nice guy and had absolutely no issues whatsoever. Practiced my falconry and it was terrific. Just no problems. When I moved to Utah, it was not known to me that there was a real conflict between the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and the falconers here in Utah. And so I walked into the local Fish and Game office, the regional office here in southern Utah, walked up to the counter. There was a game warden behind the counter, and I just says, "Hey, I'm Martin Tyner. I've just moved up here from California. I'm a master falconer. I would like to get my Utah falconry license." And that game warden took one look at me and said, "I hate falconers, and I hate California falconers worst of all." And then I made the critical mistake of saying back to him, "Well, I hate game wardens, give me my license." Of course, that's the worst thing I could have done. This guy had dealt with falconers and had a bad taste in his mouth from falconers, and here's this young guy just moved in from California that just responded back in a negative way instead of trying to turn that situation positive. And it literally took me years to gain the trust of the local conservation officers here in southern Utah. They made me take the falconry test over again. They did not respect my California falconry license, which they were supposed to. I had just all sorts of issues and problems. Do not make that mistake. Do not cop an attitude with a game warden, especially someone that's in your regional office. They can certainly make your life hell. So I realized my mistake. Actually, really quickly, I realized my mistake as the words were coming out of my mouth, and I wish I would have shut my mouth quicker, because it was, the game warden had no right to come at me that way, and that's his responsibility. But it was my responsibility to handle it far better. And so, I took the written test. I was able to get my license and get things moving along, and I would at least a couple of times a week, when I would go out hawking with my bird, I would, before leaving to go fly the bird, I'd drive over to the local Fish and Game office. I'd walk in the office, and I would just say, "Hey, I'm taking my bird out hunting. Would anybody like to come?" And of course it was no, nobody wanted to come. And so I did that, and I was also a licensed wildlife rehabber and educator, and offering my services, and just basically bending over backwards to present myself and to present falconry in a positive light to the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. Finally, they started to come out and go with me, and they discovered, hey, this is actually kind of fun, and my goodness sakes, he catches a rabbit. We're not concerned about that. And once they discovered that falconry was pretty much benign, and it was really interesting and a beautiful, beautiful ancient art form, that the local game warden started to see me and started to respect the work that I did, especially with the wildlife rescue. And the game warden that I had such a bad time with my first day walking into the regional Fish and Game office here in Cedar City became one of my best friends. And so if I could ever encourage everybody, please don't create conflict with the local game wardens. Don't cop an attitude. Keep a copy of your state regulations in your vehicle at all times. So if you have a game warden that really has no idea what the rules and regulations are in Falconry, because it's quite obscure, a lot of them don't, you can pull out the state regs and you can say, well, and here's the part that says that I can do this, and here is also my state falconry license. Here's my 3-186A, which is the paperwork that goes with each bird that you have. Here's the band and the band numbers, and here's everything you need to know. And for the most part, even game wardens that have had a bad time with falconers in the past, if you're willing to help them to understand, they're really nice guys. I've been here for 42 years. There isn't a game warden in southern Utah that I don't consider a good friend, and they appreciate the work that I do, not only with the wildlife rescue and the education, but the falconry as well. And so developing that friendship with your local game wardens is extremely important. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some bad game wardens out there. I did have a situation several years ago with a game warden. He was new. He had just come into the Southern Regional Office area, and like I did so many times before, I'd walk in, say, "Hey, anybody want to go hawking? I've got my bird. We're going to go out hawking." And I'd say, if anybody wants to come, I'm going to be over by the college farm. That was a great place to hunt cottontails and jackrabbits. And so I left, and I get my birds out of the car, start walking out through the field, and hear this new game warden pulled up right behind my car, and he flipped on his lights and got on a speaker and commanded me to come back. And I'm going, okay, I don't know why he wants me to come back, but I walked back to the car, and he wanted all of my information. He wanted my license, he wanted my driver's license, he wanted my 3-186A, he wanted all of my paperwork dealing with falconry. And he wasn't pleasant, to say the least. He was quite aggressive in his demands. So anyway, I just complied. I gave him all the information he wanted. And by the time he finished with me, I had to go back to work. And so I missed flying my bird that day. Well, I thought that was kind of a one-off situation because I gave him all that information. And so the next day I went out to the same place to go fly the bird. And just as soon as I got out there and got out of the car and walked away, here comes the Fish and Game truck. And this game warden, calls me back, and he demands all of my paperwork again. And I says, well, I just showed you all my paperwork yesterday. And he says, give me your paperwork now. And I'm going, okay. So I got out all the paperwork and showed him everything, and he thumbed through it and wasted another half hour, 45 minutes. So now it's time for me to go back to work. And so I went back to work, and then I went out a third day. And here comes the same game warden. He lets me get out across the field. He turns on his lights. He gets on the bullhorn. He calls me back to the car and does the same thing again. And so I'm getting a little upset about that. So, I complied. I let him look through all the information. Half hour, 45 minutes later, he turns me loose, and I go back because my lunch hour's over. I've got to go back to work. And so the next day, I go into the Fish and Game office, and I sit down with the regional supervisor for the Division of Wildlife Resources, and he's known me for several years and knows my reputation. And I went in and I sat down and talked to him and says, hey, what's going on here? This is what this game warden is doing. And I only have limited time to go fly the bird, and he's taking up all my time every day asking for my paperwork. And he says, and the regional supervisor says, Martin, you wait right here. And he calls that game warden into his office. And the game warden comes in, and the regional supervisor basically tells that game warden in no uncertain terms, this is Mr. Tyner. And if I hear that you are harassing him for anything, you're going to be fired. You leave Mr. Tyner alone. and never saw that game warden again. He never bothered me. Occasionally saw him at the office. Occasionally see him driving down the street. But the regional supervisor, because I had a good working relationship with him, protected me from a game warden. And again, here's a game warden. I know he must have had some bad experience with the falconers, and I was the only falconer in town, and so I had to be a bad person. You know, I understand that. But sometimes if you handle the situations properly, you can get past all that. Well, that game warden was here for a couple of years, and then he transferred to another state. And when he was getting ready to leave, I'd heard he was leaving, and that it was his last day. And I stopped in the office to ask if anybody wants to go hawking, and I saw him there, and I tried to be polite, and I just says, I'm really sorry that you and I could never go hawking together. I would have really liked to take you out hawking. And that game warden, looked down his nose at me, and he says, the only regret I have is I didn't get to bust you. So, there are bad game wardens. 99% of them, 99.9% of them are just great men and women that do a tough job, and I love them to death. I respect the work they do, but there are bad ones in there somewhere. But if you handle the situation properly, we can work through that, and we can still practice our falconry, and with little disruption. And in fact, like I said, I enjoy taking the local game wardens out and let them see how these animals work, because they don't really get that intimate interaction with wildlife that we as falconers do. Anyway, that's the goal, guys. I'm gonna hammer on you. Permit, proclamations, laws. Please memorize them. Information, clubs, YouTube videos, those kinds of things. Your sponsor, be very careful. Get a really, really good sponsor, and develop a really strong friendship with your local game wardens. And your life as a falconer will be a million times easier. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.